Welcome back to our panel discussion, Intelligent Automation in Government, from chatbots to robots to AI, sponsored by KPMG here on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. My guests today are Jeff Alstott. He's Program Manager at the Intelligence Advanced Research Projects Activity. Robin Tottengall is Chief Data Scientist at the EPA. Linda Williams is Deputy Director for Strategic Technology and Investment at the Defense Logistics Agency. And Kirk Everson is Managing Director of Federal Advisory Practice at KPMG. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. And before the break, we were talking about who should be involved in this. And given some of the examples you mentioned, like the data sets of the dogs and the wolves, it seems to me, I'm speaking to a chief data scientist here, Robin, that the data selection and who has knowledge of what the data assets are that might be brought to bear on this problem should be part of that team.
Yes, definitely. And I think, Linda mentioned that, when you look at these problems, it's not only the technology side of the folks coming together to solve the problem, is right? Because we need to bring in the people who have the programmatic experience. So if you are continuing on the previous thread of, how do we define a true team that is going to be able to solve these problems, the usual strategy is, my team has some data science experience because we have folks who understand some of these algorithms, who understands how to use some of these upcoming technologies like cloud computing to deploy and solve these issues, right? But what we end up doing is we will have a discussion with the program office and start trying to understand what is your real business problem, or what is the real programmatic issue that you're trying to solve, and do not worry about the technology or the data science aspect of it. We will get to that, but what we want to know is an understanding of how do you do this, right? So it's almost like the idea of the user-centered design or design thinking, where you basically go through a journey with the clients or with the program office to understand what is your day-to-day problem, so that we get a picture of it, and then come back as a data science team to figure out, okay, if this is your problem, how do we break that down in the world of mathematics or statistics, and how can we solve that? That's the way it applies. And usually, and DJ Patel used to say this, from the former White House chief data scientist, right? Data science is a team sport. So always make sure that it's not your smartest data scientist picking an algorithm. Maybe we will go for this. And most of the time, what we have seen is simple mathematical models work better than complex models, right? So that is the important part. Like, you have to talk to the program office and try to understand what their problem is, and then you bring in the data scientist to solve it. So that's basically the strategy that we take.
Sure. Okay. And Jeff, you have data scientists in there in IARPA, and you're the project manager, I guess, for some of these problems. But you mentioned one that seemed to be, like, to me, the toughest problem of all to ever solve, and that's geopolitical forecasting.
Sure.
I mean, we might have, guessed that perhaps a North Korean summit may or may not come off. These things are not hard for the layman to understand, but really, that seems like probably one of the toughest problems possible with so many variables. So the question is, who do you pull together, and what is the business problem? I mean, tell us more about that problem and who can help solve it.
Right. So IARPA has had
a strategy for solving it.
So IARPA has had a suite of programs over the years about the techniques available to people in order to help their thinking, in order to make them more accurate at forecasting. So things like thinking in terms of probabilities, updating in response to weak evidence that's not conclusive but does point in a direction, ways of aggregating opinions and having people bet against each other in order to really make people put their reputation where their mouth is, things like this. But for the current effort, which is about using automation methods in order to speed up or grow that process, again, yes, we have data scientists in the loop. And so there are people who are, say, political science experts or economics experts, or who are just good at reading the news and coming up with forecasts that are accurate. But you also need to bring in these data scientists if you want to automate this process. And so you really want to have, as Robin mentioned, there's often the case where people want just the data scientists to come in and solve all the problems, right? But they are coming into some domain in which there are domain experts. And so you really need these two groups to be talking with each other and working hand in hand. And so I don't know what the status of our current performers is on this, but I would bet a considerable amount of money that our performers that are doing the best are those that have their data scientists at least aware of the domains that they're trying to aggregate opinions on, so that they have some input as to what relevant data might be, and so on, right? Because it is often the case that a data scientist operating completely without much domain expert input will float off into space. And I've done this myself in the past before I got some experience. So having that coupling is really important.
And Kirk, it strikes me then, given all that we've heard about who's involved, that there must be an iterative quality to this whole process. Because if you're testing something where you want an outcome and you know what your inputs are, it seems like there's a way to test your artificial intelligence and cognitive learning systems so that you know that if you put a black marble in, a black marble is going to come out the other side.
Well, I think Robin brought that point up before, where you're really looking at humans validating essentially what the algorithms are doing for you. I think that's extremely critical, even in the front end when you're training the AI, because you really need human interaction from experts, considering too that you may have some training bias as well that you have to consider. And so if you've got folks involved in training that algorithm that are from a certain area of the agency, they may not consider the objectives or the considerations of another area of the agency or another part of the mission. And so avoiding training bias by having a team that is cross-enterprise is important to be able to allow for that AI algorithm to have a fulsome response. And the more that you train it, the more the confidence intervals will increase. Because a lot of misconceptions around AI was I just plug in this black box, throw my data in there, and it kind of figures it out, right? And that's not the case. I mean, there's a lot of really creative marketing out there that you see on TV, but that's not how it works in reality, right? You really have to have a data strategy. You have to have a team of data scientists. You have to have a team of programmatic experts, and frankly, evangelists as part of your team, because it's good to start small, and a lot of agencies are starting small with pilot projects. But the next step is to evangelize the successes of that project. And so, if you don't have the ability to evangelize and have that kind of buy-in from senior leadership, you could do all the testing in the world and have a very accurate response and a very accurate output, but nowhere for it to go. So I think it's important that you have a team that has that programmatic expertise, understands the mission across the enterprise, can train that data from that perspective, but also be able to take the results of that proof of concept to the higher powers that be, if you will, to say, look, this works, here's the ROI I got out of this, and here's how we can apply this to the pain points in the agency.
Sure, and that all gets to the issue of the workforce. Because we have data scientists, we have PhD program managers, we have people that know logistics inside out and the technologies that run them. But yet somehow there's an ingredient of, say, at the program level or the business office level, where they need to neither be Luddites and say, look, I've been doing this all my life, I don't know machine's going to help me, or people that say, I need a magic box that's going to help me do my job or do my job. So you need some sophistication at that level, but you also need specific skill sets, it seems, in government, even if you turn a lot of the developmental work to contractors, which makes sense for a lot of agencies. You still need someone in the agency that knows what they're doing to deal with it. So talk about the workforce issues, and as you look toward finding people in the budget constraints we all have, what you're looking for and what some of the gaps are skills-wise.
So first I'd like to say I think that's one reason that at DLA we're targeting that robotic process automation, RPA, initially. There's a quick return on investment, and the skill sets that are required are not that different than we already have in-house. The different vendors that are out there that provide RPA have made it very user-friendly. You don't have to be a traditional programmer or developer to actually program a process in. So in bringing in the technology, I think we're okay with our skill sets. And as those processes are automated, essentially what we're doing is we're allowing the worker to be upscaled. No longer do they have to do that repetitive, redundant, usually boring work that they've spent a lot of their time on. Now they can pivot and work on either things that are important but not urgent, that they haven't been getting to, or they're looking at more complex value-added tasks that we can get accomplished. And that, again, it goes to the customer that we're supporting. The faster, better, cheaper we can do things, the more power we give to the warfighter. So I think that ties in well. As we move into artificial intelligence and more of the machine learning, we have stood up a chief data officer in DLA, and we're looking to bring on data scientists and data analysts to fill that gap that we've got currently in some of our workforce. And we're very lucky, I think, in DLA that our business users are already very excited about this. Our financial operations folks are looking at robotic process automation for how they can do what-if analysis, how they can take the thousands of transactions that they do every day and automate either the full process or a portion of the process so that the human analyst only has to look at the anomalies. They only have to look at the unusual things that fall outside of the parameters that are already programmed into the bot.
Yeah, so for the financial people, this is the best thing since pivot tables.
Exactly.
In many ways. And something earlier you said too, as people move up the food chain in their knowledge of this, it seems to me that what you're saying is that people that are doing a repetitive task and they are given a way, or they devise their own way to automate it, they could become experts in that process of automating tasks and finding applications for this and kind of pulling themselves up the learning ladder.
Absolutely. I think it's a technology that, so long as you can understand, say, an if-then-else statement, you can probably work through robotic process automation.
That's something I guess we've seen in successive generations of automation of whatever the task might be. Someone takes on learning the tools and they leave their original area of expertise and become experts in that automation using those tools, which is a whole new career for people, which sounds pretty exciting. Robin?
So I think from a workforce standpoint, I think, you know, when I was thinking about the topic of our discussion today, right, I have more and more examples of how we can use AI or we can use more data science techniques to drive the agency's mission forward. But I think one example that I can think about where it's not a full robotic process automation, but it has some components to it, because one of the challenges we have is we have to look for specific research articles before we can go and create a regulation, right? So there are scientists trying to understand what are the different studies done on a specific let's say toxin across the different landscape of scientific articles, and their challenge is they are limited by the amount of time they can read the article to get to the material, right? So it's not a robotic process automation, but it's not a full AI either, because what we have to do is we have to build a process where we can extract the data from that unstructured data and then establish a process where the model can go in and grab the data from the, or look at the scientific paper and say, oh, this paper is actually valuable for you, this paper is not valuable for you. So I think we are seeing, I am working down from the class 3 to class 1 in my case, because I am seeing more and more application in the agency for using, to your point, class 3 based methods, because agency is traditionally more scientific, right? So they were not known as data scientists, but in the modern language they are data scientists. So we have a lot of PhDs, scientific community, who are really smart. So what I'm doing is I'm giving them the new tools and showing them that you have a new way to do the same process that you're doing by bringing in AI or machine learning algorithms to your processes. So that is where I am seeing more and more adoption within the EPA. So workforce wise, what we are doing is making sure that there is enough training materials and enough, my team has established a community of practice. So we have approximately 2,000 practitioners, or 250 practitioners comes to the community of practice, and we talk about how we are looking at AI and machine learning to do some of their works and how they are improving it. So what I am seeing is that community is actually training the agency to become more data science aware. Right? So, under the current conditions, we have limitations on how much we can hire from the outside. Then what we are doing is we are looking up to the external vendors we have, like KPMG or Deloitte or SAIC, to find out, what is your data science practice going to look like, and can we leverage your skill sets to solve a problem. So that's the current strategy that we have at the agency, because that seems to be easy rather than going through the whole process of hiring somebody. So how do we retrain our workforce to become more data science aware, and how do we look outside to our partners to see what kind of capabilities you can bring into the table so that we can successfully solve the mission. So that's where current strategy for EPA is.
Yeah, and Robin, Jeff, what Robin mentioned sounded almost like the process of discovery in that example, where here's all the articles that could possibly be relevant just like lawyers get truckloads of materials and so what's really in there? It strikes me that's something that is relevant also in the intelligence community. And who can solve that for you?
Right, so we're actually launching a new program titled Better, which is exactly about text analytics and trying to sift through a large quantity of documents for an analyst and present to them information that is in their domain that they're caring about, but also finding related topics that maybe they hadn't previously considered. So that's definitely an issue within the intelligence community that we're pushing on. But the discovery process actually works on an even larger scale when it comes to innovation within some office, which is we've heard about that there are all these opportunities to bring in automation, and that if you can bring the data scientists in, they can talk to the domain experts, then they can find magic opportunities that will greatly yield labor productivity, and then we can all be working on important things, right? This is all good and it's all true. However, it's only true if you actually have the data or IT processes present in order to build those capabilities, right? And it, as I've seen time and time again, where the data scientist understands the domain and says, yes, we could actually do this on the basis of some conversation with the domain experts, be that the accountants or the acquisitions folks or whatnot. But the issue is that the paperwork and the IT is set up wrong, right? So for example, if you're doing things literally on paper, then you are very unlikely to be able to automate that process, right? If you're doing things in Word documents, then it's tricky, right? If you're doing things even in Excel, if it's based on some template in which there's color coding that the human is paying attention to, right? And that's how they know where the right number should go, then you're gonna have issues. So there's really a sort of base layer of just IT capabilities, which we've heard from Kirk and others about. And you need to put those in place sort of in anticipation of possible solutions that you don't know what they are yet, because you don't want to end up in a scenario where we say, yes, we can make a widget for you that will automate this process and you'll get half your time back, but we will need to stand up this whole big IT system, because then it becomes a really big cost for this one specific gain. Instead, you want to have processes that are amenable to automation, so that when you later identify automation opportunities, you're able to actually use them.
Okay, and Kirk, before we break, I wanted to get in one more question to you about the workforce situation. Again, looking across government and looking at this industry. First we had coders, and then we had cybersecurity people. Right. Sounds like intelligent automation and the many sub-technologies under that is the next draw for people.
Well, I wanted to pull the thread on Linda's point around the workforce and doing higher value activities. We're frankly, and I think this is true everywhere, but especially in this DC metro area, I think there's a talent shortage across the board. And just like government, private sector struggles to get some of those really smart people on board, because when they come on board, the younger folks don't want to do the mundane. They don't want to do the repetitive. And so we're actually seeing intelligent automation as a way to increase employee morale, but to also attract and retain this talent. Because the last thing you want to do is take someone that's studied data science or machine learning or automation or whatever, an IT bachelor's degree at a very prestigious organization, come to a firm or an organization or an agency and say, okay, I need you to reconcile those two spreadsheets. They don't want to do that. They're going to sit there for maybe a year and leave. And so the idea of retooling the workforce is definitely a part of this, because again, what we're finding is folks want to do those really cool things in the agency. They want to take that next step in their career path and in their technical knowledge. So to us, even with our internal automation that we're doing at KPMG, because we are drinking our own Kool-Aid, we are automating our processes as well, we're putting some of our really smart people on those automation opportunities because they really want to take a bite out of this apple. So I think, to me, it's dealing with stakeholder engagement and increasing employee morale and dealing with backlogs, but it's also recruitment and retention of the workforce in many cases. So it's exciting, and we're seeing a lot of really neat things in the workforce aspect.
All right, on that note, we'll take a short break. This panel discussion is Intelligent Automation in Government, from chatbots to robots to AI, sponsored by KPMG here on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com.